This is an Alfa Romeo, but is it really? Have they done enough to make sure it is an Alfa? That's the question we're going to answer today. I'm Peter from Autogefühl. Welcome to Italy and welcome to the Alfa Romeo Junior Veloci. It's a whole mouthful, but this is their first full EV of Alfa, and this is their sort of small platform offering. Now, in essence, we know what this is. We've seen this platform before. Obviously, Alfa is part of the Stellantis group, so we've seen this in the Peugeot E2008, the Jeep Avenger, the Opel Corsa, and a whole bunch of other cars. It has the same underpinnings, but Alfa has thrown the book and the kitchen sink and then some at it, and has made sure that it is a real Alfa. Especially when you go through a bit of a tighter corner and you hit the throttle too early, you can feel how that differential is fighting the power and trying to put it in the right spot. And it's really interesting, because obviously you talk about all this technology, but when you feel it work in an environment like this, it is pretty impressive. Now, of course, we got to talk about charging port back here on the left. This is your 54 kilowatt hour battery with 100 kilowatt fast charging and 11 kilowatt three-phase charging at home. Now, we can't do any practical range testing here on the racetrack today, obviously, but there is a claimed range of over 400 kilometers, which is comparable to the other Stellantis models. Now, if an EV is not your cup of tea, that is no problem, because there are other versions available. There will be two hybrid versions. First of all, the front wheel drive, which is the 1.2 liter three-cylinder with hybrid drive, and there will also be a four-wheel drive version later in the year. Now, this Veloci model has 280 horsepower. That's the top of the line crazy version. There is also a slightly less crazy and obviously slightly less expensive version at 156 horsepower. Here in the front, some typical Alfa design elements. Obviously, these daytime running lights, it's hard to see maybe in this light. I think that looks quite cool. The whole opening and the front bumper, it looks aggressive, it looks stylish, it looks modern. I quite like the design with the big Alfa logo here on the top and the radar unit here on the bottom. I think it's an elegant solution for the radar like this, because it's keeping things symmetrical, and the license plate down here on the bottom, other than Alfas from the past that had it on the side. I think that is quite nice as well. So overall, despite all the flies on it, this works quite well, I think. This one in particular, with 20-inch wheels in the Veloci form, you can go down as far as 17 inches depending on the variety that you pick. Size-wise, they don't call this a crossover, they don't call this a small SUV, but you know, if I stand next to it, it's about 1.50 meters high. I'll leave it up to you to decide if it is a crossover or if it's still a hatchback. Let me know in the comments which one you think it is. I will of course show you the inside in a bit, but let's finish the round around the car. The rear is very particular, obviously haunting back to several Alfas from the past, but there's also a lot of function to this design, where you want a teardrop shape obviously for maximum aerodynamic efficiency, but the teardrop will come all the way down to here. Obviously you can't have that, so what they did is cut it off here, made this concave shape, and it effectively functions the same as a longer car would, which is good for drag, which is good for aerodynamic efficiency. I'll open the boot for you right away as well while we're at it. 400 liters of boot capacity, which they say is the perfect mix between keeping this shape open and functional in terms of aerodynamic efficiency and also usable space in the boot. We have a little bit of double floor, so you can add some space, and there's a little cubby here for some tools, and I don't think you can fit your charging cable in here, but no worries, there is a frunk. At first glance you would say, where's the frunk? There's no frunk, and you could debate about this, but this thing here is a frunk. This is where you put your charging cable. You can see this is actually shaped like your charging cable. So this is specific for your cable. Now this is just a, you know, wouldn't even qualify as a roof box, I think. But this is very handy, because this is something that it's always annoying to put your cables in the back. It's always in the way, they get dirty, they get wet. It doesn't really work in the boot where you also put your luggage, for example. So this is actually quite nice as a solution, that they give you this as a dedicated place to put your cables. So from the outside to the inside for a cockpit overview. Now it is very black in here, and there's a lot of Alcantara and leather around us, but that is specific to this top trim Veloci model. So if you go down the range, there's a variety of options for interior trim that you can get. The screen here in front of me and the buttons down here are of course from the Jeep Avenger, and also the screen, the driver's display in front of me, is very familiar from the models that I mentioned earlier. That's all fine, that's the platform we're working with. Alfa Romeo has given it a bit of Alfa Romeo sauce, so you got a big logo here, you got these haunches around the instrument cluster that of course reminisce from Alfas of old, and overall they give it some Italian feel. So with this Alcantara, like I mentioned, these bucket seats that are very supportive but not very comfortable. So there's a lot of Alfa sportiness touches. In front of me is a steering wheel with real buttons. I like that way, call me old-fashioned maybe, but it is simple, it has no learning curve, and it requires no effort to think or relearn anything. Things like the display are slightly angled towards me as the driver, so that gives it a bit more of a cocoon feeling of this car. Now you can always ask if that's necessary, because in the end it is a small sort of urban car. Do you really need sporty cocooning? I don't know, I don't really think so, but it does work. It does give you a bit of a feel that you're in the car rather than on top of the car. So that's pretty good. Working our way down through the middle console, we have an inductive charging pad over here. I'll put my phone in so you can get a sense of scale. So you fit one phone, but it also has USB on each side, so that's quite nice. Here's the key, by the way. Alfa Romeo key. Nothing spectacular to see there. Here in the middle we have some lovely fingerprinty piano black. Just don't do it. With our start-stop button, gear selector, parking brake, and our driving modes. So pretty standard Stellantis there. Then we have a bin here in the middle with some dividers that you can pull out and divide. Very exciting. You probably put your key and a lot of other junk there. And then we have this armrest here in the middle with a bin on the inside for some cards, sunglasses, and who knows what else. Not all not very big, but quite functional. For everyday use, I would not pick these full bucket seats because they are too uncomfortable to sit in for a long time, and they are also too cumbersome to climb in and out of the car on a regular basis. So that is not so practical. The rear handle up here, and that's the space you get with two adults in the front. Now if I'll show you, I'm 1.83 m and I fit relatively fine. There's not a ton of space left here. There is a decent amount of headroom, so that's fine. And overall, I think I could sit here for a while. My feet fit under the seat, so that is okay, but there's a bit of a lip here. What they've done with the seat, it's interesting, if you look this way. So it's concave for extra space, but it is rock hard plastic. And they've made these holes here. As a family man, I can tell you that this is a bad idea because your kids will find it hilarious to constantly poke you through the seat. So I don't think that is a smart design choice if you are driving with kids in the back. If I move behind myself into the car, you can see that it becomes quite problematic, but once I'm in the shape of the seat, it's sort of fine. I don't have a ton of space and I sit quite far back. But this is not comfortable for adults. So yeah, take that for what it is. There is a charging port for USB and there is a bit of a hump in the middle, but not too much. So there is some space for your feet, but it is quite limited because it's not a flush design here on the floor. So that is also something to take into consideration. For kids here, it's probably fine if they're not too tall. But I'd say for teenagers, it becomes slightly questionable. Now, of course, sitting in the middle is always higher and harder, but over here I have to say it's not too bad. There's space for my feet, there's space for my knees, and as a 1.83 m adult, I can sit here relatively fine. I would actually say it's more comfortable than sitting behind myself. But of course, when I sit with three times myself, then it gets problematic for sure. Now, the door is a collection of hard plastic and not so usable space. So this is all hard, this is hard, this is hard. There's no door bin. And even this, where you put your elbow, is just hard packed plastic. So we are here at Alfa's own test track. Former Formula 1 certified track to give this car a bit of punishment behind a professional driver. And I have to say, man, those 38mm ventilated brakes, they keep working. So that is good. And the real big one is that differential. You can really feel how it's working, especially when you go through a bit of a tighter corner and you hit the throttle too early. You can feel how that differential is fighting the power and trying to put it in the right spot. And it's really interesting because obviously you talk about all this technology, but when you feel it work in an environment like this, it is pretty impressive. Whew! Driving around in the Alfa Romeo Junior Veloci. Now we're not on the public roads because this car isn't homologated yet, so we are on Alfa's racetrack. We've done a few hot laps before, both on the long circuit and on the actual racetrack. So yeah, that obviously gives you a lot of impressions about the car. First things first though, normal driving. Well, it's exactly what you expect. If you know anything about the other platforms, if you've ever driven one of those, it's very similar. Same size, same wheelbase, same turning circle, all those things. So it is a compact car. They don't call it a crossover, but it does everything a compact car does. So it's easy to turn, light steering. This car weighs just under 1,600 kilos, which they claim is very light for its class, so that's nice. And overall, it is a nice car to maneuver in. Short turning circle, everything, good visibility all around, so that's pretty good. And you're not really going to notice any difference here in this Veloci model in that sense. The seats are not the most comfortable thing in the world, especially these bucket seats. Yeah, obviously that's for this Veloci model, for your aggressive sporty driving. None of that applies to the real world. Personally, I wouldn't even pick these because they are not comfortable enough for long journeys. But that said, when you put it all in maximum attack mode, then all that talk about differentials and extra powers and sophisticated suspension is starting to make sense a little bit. Early on the racetrack, you really notice that differential working. When you go into the tight corners and you hit full throttle, that 280 horsepower really starts to come alive. And you can really start to feel it working. You feel it through the steering wheel, you feel the car behave underneath you, and that's actually quite impressive. A mechanical torsion diff is really valuable in that situation. You really can improve your driving and improve the handling, and all that talk about sportiness and about drivability and driving fun is suddenly starting to make sense that way. So in this Veloci model, you do get all the extra performance and all the extra toys, but I don't really see that much options to explore all that performance other than straight line speed, because it is significantly faster in a straight line than all the other cars on this same platform that only have to make do with 156 horsepower. You really feel it's basically twice the power, so you really feel that difference. So after spending a day with this Veloci model of the Alfa Romeo Junior here on a racetrack in Italy, have we fallen in love? Have we come to a conclusion about this car? I think so. I think this is, of course, an Alfa in disguise in many ways. Underneath, it is a very familiar Stellantis platform, and Alfa itself cannot outdevelop that platform. But, in all honesty, Alfa has poured a lot of Alfa sauce on this car, making it a true Alfa, dare I say. I don't know what a true Alfa really means, but they've done quite a lot to make this stand out from the rest. Now, of course, especially in this Veloci model with a torsion differential, with a lot more power, with upgraded brakes, with a lot of toys inside and on it, yes, it makes a big difference. Yes, it is really a step above a Jeep Avenger, for example, but you expect that from the top of the line model. If you strip all those extras from this Veloci model away though, underneath it is just another car on a familiar Stellantis platform. That's not to say that's a bad thing though. I think the platform is solid. Cars like an Opel Corsa or a Jeep Avenger are good cars and have a very different character to this. And I think that is the key takeaway here. Alfa Romeo puts a bit of their magic in it and it becomes an Alfa Romeo. And you see that in little details, you see that in the face of the car, you see that in the DNA of the car. And you don't even have to have the full Veloci sporty crazy version for you to feel that little bit of Alfa fairy dust. In terms of what it delivers, I think this is a practical proposition in terms of the size and the usability of the platform. I think it does exactly what the other cars in the same lineup do, but with an Alfa character and an Alfa DNA that is unmistakable Alfa. So if that's something that you like, if you're a fan of the brand, it's a little bit similar as with the Jeep Avenger. If you're a fan of that feeling and that message that comes with the brand, I think this is a great proposition and a great car to shortlist if you are in the market for something this size and potentially fully electric. This video is also available in Dutch, by the way, on the Dutch channel. It's in the description below, so if you want to see me speak Dutch, then definitely subscribe there and watch this video in Dutch.